What do you do when the person you love chooses their family over you, leaving you alone and pregnant, struggling to make sense of it all? What if, in the end, karma has its own way of making sure justice is served? My world came crashing down when Kevin, my husband, chose his brother's lavish wedding over me, leaving me, 9 months pregnant and alone. But little did Kevin know, karma had a way of working itself out, and it had big plans for him and his family. My name's Sarah, and I used to think I had everything figured out. A great job as head of marketing at Kevin Edding, a loving husband, Kevin, and a comfortable life. I was paying off our mortgage with my own salary, feeling incredibly proud of my financial independence. Family played a big role in our lives, too. Kevin had a younger brother, Ryan, and their mom, Dolores, was always around. Their father had passed away years ago, so Kevin and Ryan made sure to look after her, which I found touching. It made me admire Kevin even more, seeing the way he cared for his family. At first, Dolores seemed to like me. We'd chat over coffee during family gatherings, and she'd always ask about my work. "Kevin Edding, huh?" she'd say with a nod. "Sounds important." I appreciated her approval. I wanted to fit in with Kevin's family and be part of their tight-knit group. Our first few years of marriage were filled with weekend barbecues, holiday dinners, and impromptu game nights with the extended family. I remember one Thanksgiving, where all of us crowded around Dolores's dining table, laughing and talking over each other. "Pass the gravy, will you?" Kevin's uncle bellowed. "You've had enough gravy, old man," Dolores shot back, but she was grinning as she handed it over. I looked around the table, feeling a deep sense of belonging. This was my family now, too. But cracks started to show during a New Year's Eve party at Dolores's house. I was in the kitchen, refilling my glass of wine, when I overheard Dolores talking to Kevin and Ryan in the living room. "Did you see what Brenda's wearing?" Dolores snickered. "That dress probably cost her all of $5. I froze, my hand still on the bottle. Brenda was Kevin's cousin, a single mom struggling to make ends meet. "I'm just saying," Dolores continued, her voice dripping with disdain. "Some people should know their limits. Don't try to play with the big boys if you can't keep up." My cheeks burned with embarrassment, not for Brenda, but for Dolores. This wasn't the warm, welcoming family I had imagined. I peeked around the corner, watching as Dolores leaned in conspiratorially, giggling with Kevin and Ryan. As time passed, I couldn't ignore the growing unease I felt around Dolores. What I initially dismissed as harmless teasing started to feel like something darker. And it wasn't just Brenda who became her target. At every family gathering, Dolores would huddle with Kevin and Ryan, whispering and snickering as their eyes darted around the room, landing on various relatives and friends, only for them to burst into muffled laughter. One Easter Sunday, I couldn't take it anymore. Dolores was holding court in the living room, Kevin and Ryan flanking her like loyal subjects. "Did you see Janet's new car?" Dolores was saying in a hushed voice that was still loud enough for everyone to hear. "Probably got it from the buy here, pay here lot. I bet she'll be paying it off until she's 80. Before I knew what I was doing, I stood up, marching over to their little group. "Hey," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Don't you think that's a bit much? Janet can probably hear you." The room fell silent. Dolores's eyes narrowed and she looked up at me. "Well, well," she said with a sarcastic smile. "Looks like we've offended your delicate sensibilities, Sarah." Kevin and Ryan exchanged uncomfortable glances. "I just think it's rude," I pressed, my heart racing. "Why do you always have to put people down?" Dolores's fake smile vanished. "If you don't like it, you don't have to listen," she sneered. "Why don't you go sit somewhere else?" I felt slapped across the face. I looked at Kevin, expecting him to back me up, but instead he stared at the floor, avoiding my eyes. "Fine," I said, my voice tight with frustration. "I will." That was the turning point for me. I could no longer ignore what had been brewing under the surface. Kevin's family was toxic, and I had to make a choice. The last thing I needed was to be surrounded by people who couldn't support me when it mattered most. With my pregnancy reaching its final stages and no support from the one person I thought I could count on, I was done. From that day on, family gatherings became a special kind of hell. I'd sit alone, nursing a drink, while Kevin stuck to his mother's side like glue. He'd throw me apologetic glances now and then, but he never came to sit with me. "Why don't you ever stand up to her?" I asked him one night after a particularly awful dinner. Kevin sighed, running a hand through his hair. "She's my mother, Sarah. What do you want me to do?" "I want you to tell her she's being cruel. I want you to have my back." But he never did, and slowly I started finding reasons not to go to these family events. Work emergencies, migraines, anything to avoid the cold stares and whispered insults. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, life threw me another curveball. I was pregnant. I stared at the little plastic stick in my bathroom, my heart racing, 2 pink lines clear as day. "Kevin," I called out, my voice shaky. "Can you come here?" He appeared in the doorway, his face concerned. "What's wrong?" Wordlessly, I held out the test. His eyes widened as he took it from me. He pulled me into a hug, and for a moment I felt like maybe everything would be okay. Maybe this baby would bring us closer together, heal the rifts that had been growing between us. But life had other plans. The pregnancy was rough from the start. Constant nausea, dizziness, and a perpetual threat of miscarriage kept me on edge. My doctor put me on bed rest, which meant working remotely. As the weeks went by, my condition worsened. My eyesight started to deteriorate rapidly, a rare complication that my doctor said could be temporary, but might also be permanent. Squinting at my laptop became impossible. With a heavy heart, I had to quit my job. I needed Kevin more than ever, but he seemed to be drifting away. He'd come home late from work, citing extra projects or drinks with colleagues. More often than not, I'd fall asleep alone, the echo of the front door closing jolting me awake in the middle of the night. The day of my C-section arrived faster than I expected. My eyesight had worsened to the point where the doctors insisted on the procedure. Natural birth was just too risky. As I lay on the cold operating table, my heart raced with a mix of excitement and fear. "Where's Kevin?" I asked the nurse, my voice trembling. She gave me a sympathetic smile. "Your husband's in the waiting room, dear. He said he'd rather stay there." The surgery went smoothly, and soon I heard the most beautiful sound, my son's first cry. As they placed him on my chest, I felt a rush of love so intense it took my breath away. Later in the recovery room, Kevin finally showed up. His face was a mask of discomfort and annoyance. "Look, Sarah, I gotta say something. This whole thing, it's not right." I blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every movement. "Normal women give birth on their own without all this surgery crap, and men aren't supposed to be here for this. We should be meeting our wives and kids at home, like in the old days." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Kevin, I couldn't risk—" "Save it," he cut me off. "I'm heading home. This place gives me the creeps." The next few weeks blurred together in a haze of sleepless nights and endless feedings. Kevin was hardly ever home, and when he was, he offered no help. Instead, he constantly complained. "Can you shut him up?" he snapped one night as our baby cried, his wails filling the silence of our dark bedroom. "I'm trying," I replied, exhaustion weighing heavily on me. "He's teething, Kevin. It hurts him." But Kevin was never patient. "All you do is focus on the kid. What about me, huh? What about our sex life?" I couldn't even process his words. Here I was, running on barely 2 hours of sleep, still recovering from a major surgery, and he was worried about sex? As the weeks turned into months, Kevin's frustration grew. One evening, as I was desperately trying to soothe our 6-month-old, Kevin dropped a bombshell. "You need to go back to work," he said flatly. I stared at him in shock. "What? But the baby?" "We'll hire a nanny," he interrupted. "We can't keep living like this, Sarah. We need the money." I wanted to argue, to say that our son needed me, that I wasn't ready to leave him. But the cold, determined look in his eyes told me it was pointless. So, reluctantly, I began job hunting. Finding work with my limited vision wasn't easy, but eventually, I landed a position at a smaller company. The pay, however, was far less than what I'd earned before. When I told Kevin, his reaction was exactly what I feared. "That's it?" he scoffed. "We're paying a nanny for this?" My throat tightened and I fought back tears. "I'm doing my best, Kevin. It's not easy with my eyesight." "Excuses," he muttered before walking away. And so, my reality was set. I rushed to work each morning, guilt gnawing at me as I left my baby with the nanny. I struggled through the day with my limited vision and came home to a resentful husband and a child who still needed me. Time passed in a blur of work, childcare, and tension. 2 years went by since my son was born. Despite the challenges, I loved him fiercely, finding joy in every milestone. But family gatherings remained a source of stress, especially when Dolores was involved. She'd put on an act, playing the doting grandmother, but it was all a show. "Come to Grandma," she'd say, arms outstretched to my son, but he'd cling to me, turning his face away from her. Dolores's expression would darken with anger. "What have you been telling him about me?" she'd hiss. "You're turning my own grandson against me." I'd try to explain, exhausted. "He just doesn't know you well, Dolores. If you visited more often—" "Don't you dare blame this on me!" she'd snap, storming off to complain to Kevin. Then, one ordinary Tuesday morning, everything changed. I stared at the pregnancy test in my hand, my heart pounding. Positive. I was pregnant again. Fear gripped me. My first pregnancy had been so difficult, and my health had been compromised. Could my body handle another? As I calculated the weeks, I realized I was already well into the first trimester. The decision, it seemed, had been made for me. With trembling hands, I called Kevin at work. "What is it?" he answered, his tone impatient. "Kevin, I'm pregnant." There was a long pause. Then he responded, "Look, Sarah, I'm busy. We'll talk later. Just don't quit your job, okay? Or we can't afford that." The line went dead. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling more isolated than ever. Thankfully, this pregnancy was easier. My morning sickness was manageable, and my vision remained stable. I continued working, determined to provide for our growing family. But as my belly grew, so did the distance between Kevin and me. He spent more and more time at his mother's house, often not coming home until late at night. One evening, as I struggled to put our son to bed with my swollen belly, Kevin walked in. "Hey," I said, hopeful. "Can you read him a story? I'm exhausted." Kevin glanced at us, then at his watch. "Can't. I promised Mom I'd help her move some furniture. Don't wait up." As the door closed behind him, a tear slipped down my cheek. I looked at my son, his big eyes staring up at me trustingly, and at my growing belly, carrying another child I already loved deeply. I was left alone, once again, with only my thoughts, my love for my children, and a feeling that things were slipping further out of my control. As my 7th month of pregnancy rolled around, I found myself preparing for Thanksgiving. Guests started arriving in the afternoon. My parents came early, my mom immediately rolling up her sleeves to help in the kitchen. Friends and relatives trickled in, filling our home with chatter and laughter. Just as I was about to serve dinner, the doorbell rang. It was Ryan, Kevin's younger brother, and to everyone's surprise, he had a woman with him. "Everyone, this is Tiffany," Ryan announced, beaming. "My fiancée." The room fell silent for a moment before erupting in congratulations. I plastered on a smile, trying to ignore the twinge of jealousy at the way Kevin's eyes lit up at the sight of his brother's happiness. Dolores arrived shortly after, her eyes widening as she took in Tiffany. "Well, well," she said, her voice dripping with approval. "Aren't you a sight for sore eyes?" Throughout dinner, Dolores fawned over Tiffany, peppering her with questions and hanging on her every word. I tried to focus on being a good hostess, but I couldn't help overhearing their conversation. "So, Tiffany, Dolores said loudly, ensuring everyone could hear. Ryan tells me you're a manager at National Bank. How prestigious. Tiffany nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable. Yes, I've been there for about 5 years now. Dolores beamed. You must be doing very well for yourself, unlike some people who can only pop out babies and breed poverty, she added, throwing a pointed look in my direction. I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation. My mother tensed beside me, ready to speak up, but I placed a hand on her arm, silently pleading with her not to make a scene. You know, Dolores continued, her voice sickeningly sweet, Tiffany here makes $155,000 a month. Now that's the kind of daughter-in-law I've always dreamed of. Smart, beautiful, successful. Tears pricked at my eyes as I remembered the years I'd spent supporting our family, paying the mortgage, building a career I was proud of. All of that seemed forgotten now. I think we should continue this lovely evening somewhere more suitable, Dolores announced, standing up. Tiffany, dear, why don't we all go to that new restaurant downtown? My treat, of course. Before I could process what was happening, Dolores, Kevin, Ryan, and Tiffany were heading for the door. Kevin didn't even glance back at me as they left. The remaining guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the festive mood thoroughly ruined. One by one, they made their excuses and left, leaving only my parents behind. They offered to help me clean up, but I refused, saying that they needed to rest themselves. Finally alone, I sank onto the couch and let the tears flow freely. Hours passed as I sobbed, my hand resting on my swollen belly, wondering how my life had come to this. It was nearly dawn when I heard the front door open. Kevin stumbled in, reeking of alcohol and cigarette smoke. He didn't say a word as he made his way to the bedroom. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and opened social media. There they were, Dolores, Kevin, Ryan, and Tiffany, grinning for selfies at an expensive nightclub. The caption read, Best Thanksgiving ever with my real family. As my due date approached, I felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The doctors had scheduled my C-section, insisting it was the safest option given that it had been less than 3 years since my last one. I tried to focus on preparing for our new arrival, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off with Kevin. One chilly winter afternoon, I found him unpacking bags full of summer clothes. What's all this? I asked, puzzled. Kevin shrugged, barely meeting my eyes. Just saw a good sale. Thought I'd update my wardrobe. It didn't make sense, but with the impending birth occupying my thoughts, I pushed my suspicions aside. I'd been meticulously saving money in a separate account, determined to take a couple of months off work to recover and bond with our new baby. My workplace had approved 2 months of unpaid leave, which was a relief. I'd set aside enough for the mortgage, bills, and even a babysitter for our 3-year-old. For once, I felt prepared. 3 days before my scheduled C-section, chaos erupted. I was resting on the couch when Kevin burst through the door, Dolores hot on his heels. Hurry up! Dolores barked as Kevin rushed to our bedroom. I struggled to my feet, waddling after them. Kevin was throwing clothes into a suitcase, the summer clothes he'd bought. Kevin! I said, my voice rising with panic. What are you doing? He barely glanced at me. Ryan's getting married in Hawaii. We're all going. The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. What? But my C-section is in 3 days. Who's going to take care of our son? Kevin zipped up his suitcase, finally meeting my gaze with cold indifference. You'll manage. You always do. Before I could respond, he brushed past me, Dolores ushering him out the door. The door slammed, leaving me in stunned silence. Reality crashed over me like a tidal wave. I scrambled for my phone, my hand shaking as I checked our joint account. Empty. All the money I'd saved gone. With trembling fingers, I dialed Kevin's number. He answered on the final ring. What? He snapped. The money, I choked out. All our savings, where is it? There was a pause, then a cold laugh. We needed it for Ryan's wedding gift. Don't be so greedy, Sarah. The line went dead. A sharp pain lanced through my abdomen. I looked down in horror to see a puddle forming at my feet. My water had broken. Panic seized me. I couldn't go into labor now. The risk to my previous C-section scar was too great. With one hand on my belly and the other clutching my phone, I called emergency services. The hospital was chaos, doctors shouting, machines beeping. I woke hours later to the gentle beeping of monitors. My mother's tear-stained face swam into view. "Sarah," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "You're okay. The baby's okay." Slowly, the fog lifted. I'd nearly died. My baby had nearly died. But we'd made it. 3 days after the emergency C-section, I was feeling surprisingly strong, both physically and emotionally. The doctors were pleased with my recovery and gave me the green light to go home. Kevin hadn't called once since he'd left for Hawaii, not to check if I was alive, not to ask about his new son. In that moment, I knew our marriage was over. I called my parents and asked to stay with them for a while. Their response was immediate and supportive. My parents doted on both boys, giving me time to rest and recover. I started researching divorce lawyers and gathering documentation of our finances. Then, exactly a week after I'd left the hospital, my phone rang. Kevin's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail twice before finally answering on the third call. "Where the hell are you? Why aren't you at home?" Kevin's voice was a mixture of anger and confusion. I took a deep breath. "I'm at my parents', Kevin, with both of our sons. I filed for divorce." There was a moment of stunned silence, then a bark of laughter. "Divorce? Are you kidding me? After everything I've done for you?" "Everything you've done?" I felt a surge of anger. "You mean like abandoning me right before I gave birth or stealing all our savings?" "Oh, get over it," he scoffed. "I'll pay you back. No problem." "In fact, I don't even want to see you again," I said. "You know why? Because I'm going to be rich." He launched into a tirade about how Ryan's new wife had offered him a job as her deputy at the bank, how they were going to start their own financial company, how she was going to make them all wealthy beyond their wildest dreams. "You never believed in me, Sarah," he spat. "You always shot down my ideas, always held me back. Well, guess what? I'm free now, and you're just a loser who can't see potential when it's right in front of her." The divorce was finalized faster than I had expected. Kevin didn't contest any of the terms. He returned the money he'd taken from our accounts and agreed to pay alimony. When it came to the house, I had all the mortgage statements showing I'd been the one making payments, and the judge ruled in my favor without hesitation. The day I moved back into the house with my boys, Kevin was there, packing the last of his things. He sneered at me as I walked in, holding our baby and with our toddler clutching my hand. "Enjoy this dump while you can," he said, carrying a box. "I'll be in a mansion soon, swimming in cash. You'll see what you missed out on." As he left, the door closing behind him, I felt a weight lift from my chest. The house suddenly felt brighter, more peaceful. 1.5 years had passed since the divorce. Life had settled into a new normal. I had returned to work and found a balance between career and motherhood. It wasn't always easy, but we were doing well, and more importantly, we were happy. Then one ordinary Tuesday, I received a news alert that made my stomach drop. "Local banker exposed as fraud, leaves family in ruins." The article detailed an elaborate scam involving Tiffany, Ryan's wife, who had convinced Kevin, Ryan, and Dolores to take out enormous loans to fund a non-existent financial company. They even mortgaged Dolores's house and poured all their savings into it, only to find out Tiffany wasn't a banker at all. She had created a fake office and a short-term rental, a setup for her con. Tiffany disappeared with millions, leaving a trail of forged documents and broken dreams. The article continued to reveal that they had also taken out additional loans to fund Ryan and Tiffany's extravagant Hawaiian wedding, the very wedding Kevin had chosen over being with me and our newborn. As I read, a mixture of emotions washed over me. Shock, confusion, and, if I'm being honest, a small sense of satisfaction. The consequences were catastrophic. Unable to pay off their debts, they lost everything: Dolores's house, their cars, even their personal belongings, all seized by creditors. Dolores was reportedly forced to take a job as a cashier just to afford a tiny apartment and food. Kevin and Ryan were also drowning in debt, their dreams of wealth shattered. I felt immense relief that I had divorced Kevin when I did. My children and I were safe, untouched by the financial collapse that had torn apart my ex-husband's family. Just when I thought it was all behind me, my phone rang. It was Dolores. Hesitating, I answered the call. "Sarah." Her voice was small, so different from her usual imperious tone. We need your help," she pleaded, asking if they could stay with us. "The children need their father and grandmother," she insisted. "You can't leave family in trouble." I took a deep breath, memories flooding back the Thanksgiving humiliation, the abandonment before my C-section, the countless times they belittled me. "Family," I said, my voice steady. "You weren't concerned about family when you left me alone, pregnant and in danger. You weren't concerned about family when you stole my savings. You weren't concerned about family when you called me a loser." Dolores tried to interrupt, but I cut her off. "I'm sorry you're in this situation, Dolores, but I'm not responsible for the choices you, Kevin, and Ryan made. My priority is my children, and I won't expose them to the chaos you've created. Please don't contact me again." I hung up and immediately blocked her number. As I set my phone down, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was over. Truly over. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to break free from toxic relationships, even when it felt like everything you knew was falling apart? Sarah's world fell apart when her husband, Kevin, abandoned her during her pregnancy to attend his brother's wedding, only to later betray her with a financial scheme that shattered their family. Despite the humiliation and pain, Sarah found strength and independence. She divorced Kevin, took control of her life, and rebuilt a future for herself and her children. When the truth about Kevin and his family's financial downfall emerged, Sarah's resilience proved to be her greatest asset. The once broken family now faced the consequences of their own choices, while Sarah remained empowered and focused on her children's well-being. Looking at Sarah's journey from the lens of self-empowerment, it's clear that her greatest strength wasn't just her ability to overcome hardships, but her courage to reclaim control over her life. Despite Kevin's betrayal, Sarah chose not to let her circumstances define her. She didn't seek revenge. Instead, she focused on her own growth and the safety of her children. By prioritizing herself and rejecting the toxic behavior of her ex-husband and his family, Sarah modeled the power of setting boundaries and protecting one's peace. This decision to cut ties with her past was not just an act of self-preservation, but a declaration that her future would be built on her own terms, free from the chaos and manipulation that had once been her reality. Have you ever had to make a tough call to break free from a toxic relationship? And what did that decision teach you about yourself? What would you have done if you were in Sarah's shoes? How do you think her decision to prioritize herself and her children reflects the importance of setting boundaries, even with family? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Let's talk about the power of choosing yourself in the face of adversity.
You are not worthy to be our daughter-in-law. Please do not come to the wedding. That's right. I hate that my sister-in-law is so ugly. I don't even want to see your face. On the wedding day. I am currently being bombarded with such verbal abuse by my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. But I am not stupid enough to give in to such things. I'll give them a surprise they'll never forget. My name is Ashley. Just the other day, my boyfriend Jeff proposed to me. And we decided to get married. We met at a mixer, felt a connection, and quickly started dating. After a year of dating, everything progressed smoothly. Is it really okay for things to go this well? Just as I was basking in this happiness, we hit a major obstacle during our marriage introduction. The visit to my parents went smoothly, and they really liked my kind husband. However, the problem was on my husband's family's side. when I greeted them with "nice to meet you" at his house. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law reacted beyond my wildest imagination. "Jeff, are you really going to marry this girl?" "That's right. She seems like she's pretending to be something she's not. I can't accept her." "Well, I don't intend to. You're trying to take Jeff from our family, aren't you? It's obvious what you're up to. Are you the type who enjoys tearing families apart?" "Oh, there are such women." Despite the confusion, I somehow denied it. "No, that's not true. I hope to get along with you too, as well." "Stop it, please. I can't stand a girl who seems as nasty as you." "Me neither. I absolutely can't stand the thought of you becoming part of our family. How could you?" Then, my husband, who had been listening to the conversation, yelled at the two of them, "Enough already. Mom, Linda, what are you talking about? I chose Ashley. We're about to be happy together, why would you say such things?" "But, Linda, you hate this girl too, right?" "Of course I do." "Jeff, can't you find someone better?" "I want Ashley." "No matter what you two say, I'm going to marry Ashley. I've already decided. Please support us as a family." Taking advantage of Jeff's statement, my father-in-law also chimed in. "Both of you are being childish." Perhaps moved by my husband's earnestness, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law finally quieted down. They still looked unsatisfied until the end. But with the persuasion of my husband and father-in-law, we somehow received their approval for the marriage. Even after that, interactions with my in-laws increased, but every time we met, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law started to harass me. Today, we have a dinner at my in-laws, but I am not welcomed there. As I headed to the kitchen to help with the meal preparations, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law immediately started insulting me. Oh my. I still can't believe this girl is becoming Jeff's wife. Really though. She's not impressive at all, and she's ugly too. What? We're just stating the facts. You're shamelessly trying to become part of our family. That's right. You're not worthy to be Jeff's wife. Why don't you just break up and disappear? Please don't say such things. I truly love Jeff. Stop it, please. It's disgusting. Jeff is unfortunate to be loved by you. Know your place. In this manner, they would complain when my husband or father-in-law weren't around. It wasn't just verbal abuse. They would intentionally bump into me or step on my feet. A series of small harassments continued. Among them, the harassment regarding the wedding was particularly bad. I would regularly receive calls from my mother-in-law. "Ashley, when is the next wedding meeting?" Well, as I've said before, Jeff and I are thinking it through together. So please don't worry. Shut up. Jeff told me to come along. Is that true? Jeff hasn't said a word about it. Just shut up. Are you saying I'm lying? Of course, my husband hadn't invited the two of them to any meetings. After that, my mother-in-law kept persistently calling and emailing, and even showed up at our apartment. Even when trying on dresses, although I am the bride. They came to the shop and complained. Such a luxurious dress doesn't suit you, Ashley. That's true. It would be fine if she were as beautiful as me. But since Ashley is ugly, she's completely overshadowed by the dress. But, Jeff and I both like this one the most. Are you talking back? Can't you listen to your mother-in-law's advice? That's right. If you want to be recognized as family, You should just listen to what we say, right? Well, but. Look, go for that much simpler one. Your face isn't striking, so that's enough for you. Exactly. Just so you know, I won't forgive you if you wear a dress more luxurious than the one I had at my wedding. Even during the wedding preparations, they continuously insulted me. My preferences were completely disregarded, and the dress was almost forcibly decided for me. I consulted my husband and asked him to speak to my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, but they didn't listen at all. In fact, their behavior towards me only got worse. My husband and I were exhausted from dealing with them, who were impossible to reason with. One day, perhaps sensing how troubled I was by the harassment, my husband took me out for a walk. As we walked slowly, he spoke with concern. Ashley, I'm sorry. No matter what I say, both Mom and Linda won't listen. It's okay. Things might calm down a bit after the wedding. Even if it's only until then, it must be hard for you, Ashley? It's really okay. I also want to be recognized as a part of the family. Then, my husband stopped, turned to face me directly. I'm thinking of cutting ties with Mom and Linda. What? Why? I don't want to make you suffer anymore. So, wait a minute. It's really okay. Besides, we still have the wedding, right? But, how about this? Let's think about whether to really cut ties after the wedding is over. That's fine, right? Is that okay with you, Ashley? I'm sure your mother and sister will understand. If it's still too hard, we'll think about it together then? Okay, I'll respect your wishes, Ashley. The fact that my husband gave me the option to cut ties strangely lightened my heart. As we continued walking, he stopped again. What's wrong? When I asked, my husband pointed in a certain direction. When I looked that way, I saw my sister-in-law in a cafe. She was intertwining her fingers with a man who wasn't her husband, chatting intimately. Seeing that, my husband immediately muttered, "That's disgusting." Hey Jeff, is that possibly? Yeah, it's definitely something shady. She keeps telling you that you are not suitable as a wife, but look who's talking. This is definitely bad. Then, as if struck by an idea, my husband exclaimed, "That's it." He took out his smartphone, grinning as he took photos of my sister-in-law's affair. All right. Now I have proof. Ashley, I have a good idea. My husband then told me about a plan. Proof of the affair alone isn't enough. This plan needs your cooperation as well. So please bear with it just a little longer, okay? Jeff, are you serious about this? Of course. It will be the best surprise, huh? But if we do that, don't worry, I'm ready for this. Thus, our revenge drama began. On the wedding day, after finishing my makeup and getting dressed, I was waiting alone in the dressing room when my mother-in-law and sister-in-law barged in without knocking. As soon as they saw me in my bridal attire, they burst out laughing mockingly. Whatever you wear, you still look plain. Really? Excuse me, but could you please wait outside? What? Still being cheeky to the very end. We came all this way just to see that face of yours. Really, that plain dress just cancels out the plainness of your face. Did you come here just to say that? Normally, I'd quietly take whatever they said, but not today. Perhaps my attitude didn't sit well with them, as they began yelling furiously. What's with that look? Are you trying to say we're the bad ones? How dare you become Jeff's wife? I will never accept it. Is that all you want to say? Basically, you are not suitable to be our daughter-in-law. Please do not attend the ceremony today. That's right. I hate having such an ugly sister-in-law. I don't even want to see your face. When they said that with their face flushed, I declared, I got it. With pleasure. Huh? So, I shouldn't attend the ceremony, right? Well, you're the bride. Do you understand what you're saying? At my sister-in-law's words, I smiled and nodded. Just as you said, I won't attend the ceremony today. Oh, you all should head over quickly? The star of the show, Jeff, is waiting. With a broad smile, I said this, and they looked shocked and quickly left. Of course, this was all part of the plan. I had no intention of giving up on my own wedding. It was a strategy Jeff came up with, but it seemed to be working better than expected. After being messed with for so long, I'll give them a taste of their own medicine. My heart was pounding with excitement over the great surprise we had thought up. The ceremony began, and first, the groom, my husband, made his entrance. I changed into casual clothes and took on the role of managing the video, so I wouldn't be noticed. My husband, microphone in hand, addressed the attendees. Well, thank you all for gathering here today for us. However, unfortunately, we will have to cancel today's ceremony. At those words, the venue buzzed with surprise. Not only the other guests, but also my in-laws and sister-in-law's family were all stunned. As if to calm the venue, my husband continued. We would like to disperse now, but since you've all come, we would like to show a surprise movie instead. Please enjoy your viewing. At my husband's signal, I pressed the play button on the video. The edited video began to play on the screen provided. First, there was audio of my mother-in-law and sister-in-law's abusive language. We added subtitles to their abusive words and edited it for clarity. Basically, you are not suitable to be our daughter-in-law. Please do not attend the ceremony today. That's right. I hate having such an ugly sister-in-law. I don't even want to see your face. The guests all grinned as they listened to the recorded abusive shouts from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, glancing over at the family seats. Whether out of anger or shame, my husband's family was shaking with red faces. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law, surprised, could only gape and stare at the video. Thanks to all the provocation in the dressing room, we were able to record some prime abusive shouts. As I savored their expressions, I played the next video. What flowed next was the footage of my sister-in-law's affair. At that moment, my sister-in-law screamed and shuddered. Whispers started to be heard from the venue. Hey, isn't this bad? To think she harassed the bride and then cheated, that's disgusting. Look at the family seats. It's totally like a wake. Perhaps his patience finally snapped when the video ended. My father-in-law raised his voice in anger. Of course, not at my husband or me, but at the mother-in-law and sister-in-law. You too, what have you done to Ashley? Ever since she came to our house to greet us, you haven't reflected at all, have you? It's not like that, dear. Believe me, Dad. It was that woman's fault. Silence. To treat someone Jeff chose like that. You two are the worst as human beings. Don't be angry, please. It's all because that woman was so cheeky. Yeah, right. Mom and I. We were just trying to train her to be a suitable wife for our family. Then, the sister-in-law's husband pointed at her and said, Suitable wife? How dare you say that? Huh? After cheating on me secretly, you still dare talk big like this? How could you betray me? It's not like that. That person isn't like that. What? You were intertwining fingers looking cozy, and now this? Stop joking around to this extent. After such damning videos, their excuses held no weight. The anger of the father-in-law and sister-in-law's husband didn't subside, and the two women could only shrink away. Then, I appeared in casual clothes at just the right moment, and the mother-in-law and sister-in-law directed their anger towards me. You. What have you done? I thought you were just obeying the order not to attend the ceremony. So this was your plan. Well, I'm sorry for doing it this way. But I had no other choice. Shut up. You fool. The worst woman. That's why I hated a woman like you. You damn. I had intended to keep things as peaceful as possible. But their words completely removed any restraint I had. Taking a deep breath, I let them have it. The worst. Damn. That's my line. Do you have any idea how much you've harassed me? Put yourself in my shoes, being harassed for such petty reasons. You are the lowest of mother and daughter. With a volume I had never used before. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were taken aback. Ignoring them, I delivered the final blow. I don't need to be acknowledged by you as family. I refuse it. All I love is Jeff. If you feel that way, I will mercilessly cut you off too. I don't care what happens to you. Never involve yourselves with me again. When I was panting after saying that, my husband said, "Let's go," and took my hand. As expected, the wedding ended disastrously. The mother-in-law and sister-in-law were scorned by the attendees and became the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. Afterwards, both the mother-in-law and sister-in-law were divorced by their spouses and apparently kicked out of their homes. They tried to seek help from friends and relatives, but by then their misdeeds were well known, and no one was willing to extend a hand. Both being housewives without money, they used up their savings to rent an apartment. Though once close, they now spend their days bickering constantly. It's all because Mom said to drive Ashley out. What are you talking about? You also said you didn't like her, right? That's right, but we didn't have to go that far, did we? What? It's also because of your affair. Shut up, just shut up. I hate you, Mom. Truly, what a deplorable mother and daughter. Meanwhile, my husband and I moved close to my parents' house. We occasionally meet with the father-in-law, but we've cut ties with the mother-in-law and sister-in-law, and finally freed ourselves from stress. Now, we can spend our days happily without any worries. Come celebrate Mom's birthday instead of sleeping. The man speaking so freely to me, hospitalized with a high fever, is my husband who always prioritizes his mother. I've decided. I'm done with this husband. He's out of here. But first, let's stir up a little trouble. I am a very bad wife. And a bad daughter-in-law too. My name is Emma. In my 20s, as a single noble office lady, I never scrimped. Back then, buying deli foods from the French restaurants and enjoying a drink on Friday nights was my greatest pleasure. Now, as a frugal 40-year-old, I prefer gulping down sparkling wine. After all, sparkling wine is better than wine. Sometimes I think it might be nice to indulge like the old days. But my cooking skills have improved. Now, it's more fun thinking up menus that surpass those restaurant foods. Cooking isn't fun when it feels like a chore, but it's enjoyable when you aim to make delicious things. I used to hate cooking when I reached my 30s. It felt like mere labor back then. About 10 years ago. 2 years into my marriage. I was grappling with a particular problem, the relationship between my husband, Kevin, and my mother-in-law. Our newlywed life had been nothing but fun for a while. It all started one holiday when my husband spoke to me. Mom, What? My husband, who always calls me Emma, suddenly said Mom. I was shocked and a bit embarrassed, playfully replying. Calling me Mom is a bit premature, don't you think? Practicing for when we have kids? To my surprise, he became flustered. Sorry, I mistook you for my mom. Mistakenly calling me Mom. I couldn't believe my ears. It would have been better if he had said it was a rehearsal. My husband had never called his mother Mom in front of me before. Unsatisfied with the mistake, I asked what it meant, and he said, It's a leftover from childhood, I've always called her Mom. Although he corrected it as an adult, it sometimes slips out. Because he doesn't want me to think less of him for it. Among my female friends, many still call their mothers Mom. It didn't seem unusual. And I thought it was fine if there were no problems within the family. However, the fact that my husband still calls his mother Mom left me feeling indescribably disgusted. I couldn't understand why I could forgive my friends but not my husband, but it just felt incredibly wrong. He seemed to feel bad about the mix-up, but that wasn't the point. It was more about the fundamental discomfort I felt. After that, my husband, having let his secret slip, seemed to lose his inhibitions. He began referring to his mother as Mom, in the third person more frequently in front of me. And then, another problem arose. Ever since we married, gradually, my mother-in-law seemed to want to meet with my husband frequently. And she began inviting us to her house often. Very often. Originally, my husband had lived at home for a long time. It wasn't that he lived in the countryside, and his job was close to his parents' house. So he didn't need to live alone and could save money. If he hadn't married me, he might have ended up a mama's boy forever. But I had also lived at home for a long time, so it was mutual. However, now I began to wonder if there was another reason for his prolonged home life. Perhaps he loved his mother, or should I say, Mom, too much to leave. Observing my mother-in-law's behavior, it was hard not to think so. At least, it was clear she loved her son very much. I couldn't tell if she was overtly doting. But she certainly wanted to see his face regularly. I understand loving your own child. But he's already a man in his late 20s. It seemed about time for a little child independence, or so I thought, as an outsider. My mother-in-law's welcoming mode knew no bounds. I made Kevin's favorite fried chicken, so come have dinner with us tonight. I found Kevin's favorite snacks on sale, so I bought a lot. Should I bring them over to your place? She kept trying to connect with her son using every trick in the book, and I, getting dragged into it, honestly found it annoying. Mother-in-law, ever heard of personal space? As someone who works in caregiving, going to my in-laws' house at night, or having my mother-in-law visit our home was honestly a hassle. It might sound selfish, but after a draining day at work, I want to relax without having to be considerate of anyone else. Still, it felt cruel to snub my mother-in-law, who was waiting with homemade food. Regrettably, I had told my husband, it's a bit troublesome to have her come over so often. Why don't you visit your mom by yourself? I explained to my mother-in-law that I didn't have the physical energy because of my job. And she seemed to understand. Well, it seemed like she didn't care much, whether I came or not. Thus, my husband started visiting his parents' house regularly. I thought that settled it, but only briefly. One day, I came home from work to find my mother-in-law in our house. She had been cooking, waiting for us. Apparently, my husband had given her a spare key and told her, "Think of this as your own home." Wait a minute. I hadn't heard a single thing about this. The table was laden with my husband's favorite dishes: fried chicken, hamburgers, and pasta. If you stuck a flag in that ketchup rice, it'd be a perfect kid's meal. Thank you for cooking, but I'm not a child. I had a bad feeling as I cautiously opened the refrigerator and found that 5 days' worth of ingredients had been used up. It's the food for this house, so I thought it was okay to use it, as Kevin said. My mother-in-law explained. But I hadn't heard anything about this. Exhausted from work, I felt like my insides were boiling, but I held back. After all, my mother-in-law meant no harm. But that doesn't make it okay. And the worst part wasn't her, it was my husband, who casually okayed everything without consulting me. In the end, my mother-in-law stayed over that night and returned to her home the next morning. With work looming, I didn't have time to press my husband on why he gave the spare key to his mother. I wanted to discuss this issue as soon as possible. So I set up a time to talk with my husband that evening. Surprisingly, he agreed to the discussion quite easily. "I'm sorry. I'll ask Mom to refrain from using the spare key from now on." He promised me that. But that wasn't really the end of it. Eventually, my mother-in-law started coming to our house once or twice a week to cook and stay over. Unfortunately, my husband hadn't exactly broken his promise. The use of the spare key was to be limited, not forbidden. So that's how it is. Huh? According to my husband, I told her to limit it. But there's nothing I can do if she comes over on her own since she has the key. Are you kidding me? Giving out the spare key was the original mistake. And the person who gave it out is feigning ignorance, which is incredibly infuriating. Moreover, my mother-in-law has taken liberties like rearranging the kitchen and adding kitchenware, treating our house as if it were her own. Am I being too narrow-minded? No, that can't be it. Whose house is this again? It might already be mostly taken over. Proof of that is that my mother-in-law now casually criticizes me. "Oh, Emma, you're using bouillon cubes? Please don't feed Kevin that stuff. I raised him to eat as additive-free as possible." So, the result is a guy who loves kids' meals. I still can't say that. The husband himself chugs juices and supplements full of additives. He loves candy too. My stress had reached its limit. Maybe it would be better to divorce. I've been having sleepless nights. Naturally, my body is screaming. My stomach hurts, and I feel dizzy every day because I can't sleep. Mistakes at work are piling up. Then one day, it seemed my body had reached its limit. I developed a high fever close to 105 degrees. I barely had the energy to crawl. And I would lose consciousness almost immediately if I let my guard down. It's frustrating, but I have no choice but to rely on my husband. "Sorry, my temperature has been fluctuating between 100 and 105 degrees. Could you buy me some cooling sheets and a sports drink?" Panting, I desperately told my husband. But his response was far beyond what I had expected. "What are you talking about? We had a dinner planned at my parents' house today." Huh? What is he talking about? I try to recall, and indeed, I remember that during her last visit, my mother-in-law had said, "Let's have a dinner party at our place next time." She was excited, planning to invite my sister-in-law and her family for a fun gathering. Do you even understand my condition right now? I respond, barely able to breathe. My husband then says, "Well, I'll just go by myself then. See you." And he leaves for work, completely ignoring my request for him to buy some essentials. Doesn't he care that his wife is suffering from a high fever? Is a dinner with his mom that important? Unbelievable. It was a mistake to rely on him. I crawl back into bed, wondering if I might not wake up this time. But I do wake up. The first things I see are the stark white ceiling and curtains. It seems I'm alive, but where am I? This isn't home. My husband peers into my face, smiling, "You're awake." Where am I? At the hospital. I was really shocked. When I came home, you were collapsed in the hallway. I collapsed? Yeah, you seemed to be in agony from a high fever. Maybe you went downstairs to get some water and collapsed near the kitchen. I don't even remember if I was trying to get water. The fever must have reached a life-threatening level. I instinctively feel relieved that I woke up safely. I'm showing symptoms of dehydration. And I have no strength in my body. My stomach has been upset recently. And I feel completely wrecked. It's decided that I need to stay hospitalized for a few days to be observed. 3 days into my hospital stay, the day before I'm supposed to be discharged, my husband calls me. I wonder what it's about. Are you still sleeping? It's Mom's birthday, get up and come celebrate. Huh? I'm stunned by my husband's angry voice over the phone. Telling me, who couldn't even bathe until yesterday due to a fever, to come celebrate Mom's birthday. Is he stupid? There's no way I can go. Besides, they just had a dinner party, and now a birthday party? They could have combined them. I swallow all my complaints and respond with a logical argument. I've been hospitalized. There's no way I'm recovered. But my husband replies, "It's just the flu, get over it quickly." True, the diagnosis is influenza. But I believe my weakened immune system is due to recent stress. Whose fault does he think that is? He dismissively says it's just the flu. However, my husband doesn't consider my feelings and says, "You didn't come to the last meal, so you owe it to them." That's it. I'm done. I'm saying goodbye to a husband who prioritizes his mom over me. Did you say something? Nothing. It seems my husband missed my muttered words. Well, that's more convenient for me. I simply tell him, "I'll make sure to visit your parents' house once I'm discharged," and hang up unilaterally. Perhaps upset by how I ended the call. My husband doesn't come to pick me up on the day of my discharge. Well, I don't care. Holding all my belongings from the hospital stay, I head to my in-laws' house. "Oh, Emma, are you okay?" My mother-in-law greets me with a surprised face. "Thank you. I'm fully recovered now. I'm sorry for missing your birthday and the dinner party." "That's fine, you must be tired. Come on in." While she is kind in demeanor, her expression clearly reads, it's not really pleasant having just the daughter-in-law over. She really doesn't mind that I missed the birthday and dinner parties. After making small talk with my in-laws for a bit, I soon left their house. My home is nearby, but I decided to stop by the local municipal office first. Back at home for the first time in a while, I quickly pack my things while my husband is away. I leave the divorce papers I just picked up on the table. Everything is ready. Then, my phone rings from my mother-in-law's number. I ignore it at first as it keeps ringing, and soon I see almost 20 missed calls. I finally answer, and to my surprise, it's my husband's voice over the phone. "What's this about?" "Dear, why are you calling from your mother's phone?" "What do you mean, what's this about?" "What's this letter?" "Oh, you've read it then." A grin escapes me as my husband speaks. Then, apparently snatching the phone from him, my mother-in-law demands, "Is this true?" "Yes, it is." "So?" In the background, my husband shouts, "Mom, it's not like that." But she seems not to hear him. That's because, when I left their house, I left a letter detailing the truth about my husband. At first, I was completely deceived. But actually, my husband isn't mom first. He's just pretending to be, while he's actually extremely annoyed by his mother. I overheard him talking on the phone with someone who seemed to be his junior. "I'll treat you next time." "What? Money?" "Oh, I can get as much as I need from my mom." "No problem." Seriously, parents are like ATMs. At first, I thought I misheard. But it seems this is indeed how he feels. He finds his non-independent mother annoying, but lets her have her way to get an allowance. He gave out our house keys because he wanted more pocket money than usual. Apparently, he had been receiving about $1,000 a month from his mother, who is into stocks. However, with the truth now exposed to his mother, and having kept his true feelings hidden from his sister-in-law and father-in-law, he's been regretting and stressing over the increased interactions with his mother. Why would you? My mother-in-law is speechless. "And that person, your son, he's quit his job, you know." "What?" My mother-in-law is dumbfounded, and my husband is desperate. "What are you talking about?" When she asks him if he's quit his job, he falls silent. "I've been getting his resignation papers and pension book at home, so it's undeniable." "You thought you were hiding it from me. But when we live in the same house, you can't hide anything." The call goes almost silent on the family's end. They probably put me on speaker, so everyone heard what I said. My husband mutters, "Well, there were circumstances." Yes, gambling at the casino during work hours, important circumstances, right? That's why you got fired, isn't it? You were telling your junior about it. Hey. My husband panics, and my in-laws are appalled. "Kevin, you liked gambling? You were hiding that from me?" In response to my question, my husband hesitated and said, "Well." When pressed by his father to give a clear answer, he began, "Actually, it seems my husband has been a fan of gambling since his college days. He had kept it a secret from both me and his family, sneaking off to casinos during work breaks, so no one knew about his gambling habit. His workplace was fairly lax, and there were others doing similar things. At first, his results at work were good enough that his behavior was overlooked. However, as he gained more responsibilities at work after we got married, it became harder for him to visit casinos, which only increased his desire to gamble. Eventually, he lost control, spending more and more time at the parlors during work hours, until it was noticed by his workplace. Despite repeated warnings, he continued his long visits to casinos during work hours, and was finally fired. No company pays a salary for gambling. I'm just too tired of your duplicity and our life together. As I spoke my truth, my husband raised his voice. Even so, what's this divorce paper? Divorce is too extreme. Think it over. I'll think it over. I've thought it over just now, and I still want a divorce. You haven't thought it over at all. Are you seriously telling me to reconsider? Staying with an unemployed gambler who lies and didn't care even when I was dying? Instead of my husband, it was his mother who agreed with me. Yes, she's right. What, Mom? Aren't you on my side? I'm just an ATM to you, right? Automatic teller, Mom, that's what you think. After all the pain I went through to give birth to you. No, I mean, you're important to me, Mom. Then Emma's claims are false? Of course. Why did you panic then? When I read this letter. And immediately went to your house to ask you, Kevin, you looked pale. That is. Sigh. Your inability to answer says it all. It seems Emma was telling the truth. Wait, Mom. Give back all the money I've given you. Wait. Think it over, okay? I don't care anymore. Mom. I'm sorry. As I almost burst out laughing at the desperate exchange between my husband and his straightforward mother, I said, So, I'm divorcing you, but just so you know, I'll be asking for a division of property without considering your financial situation. My husband was at a loss for words, and on the other end of the phone. His father was laughing, it's your own fault, while his mother was likely speechless. Thinking, there's no defending him now. Thus, my husband lost the trust of his mother, the support of his father. And me, his wife. All that remained was the debt he owed to his mother. After that, as you know, I'm not Mom first. I want to change my ways, let's try again. My husband repeatedly begged for reconciliation, but I naturally refused. The problem wasn't that he prioritized his mother, it was that he was full of lies. Such an untrustworthy man is not suitable as a partner. When I firmly told him this, he seemed deeply shocked and never asked for reconciliation again. The discussion about reconciliation had been muddy, and it was hard to get him to agree to the divorce, but it was successfully finalized. He has to repay the money to his mother and is now desperately working at his new job, which pays less than his previous one, and he is being scolded by younger supervisors. Well, it's a good experience for a pampered husband. His mother has also become distanced from her sister-in-law's family due to this incident. Disgusted, his father started spending less time at home, leading to a much lonelier life than before. Well, she still has her beloved son, hopefully. His affection returns to her. Meanwhile, I started managing a cat cafe with the money I saved from work. Honestly, there's hardly any profit. It's mostly break-even or a loss due to the expenses of caring for rescue cats. But it's fulfilling, and I feel like I'm gaining something more important than money. Knowing I'm helping the cats. Although I'm single, the cats are like family to me. That's what I thought. But recently I had a big argument with someone from an NPO doing cat rescue work about strategies to protect cats. Normally, I'd think, I'll never deal with this person again. However, we both deeply care about animals and oddly hit it off. We're not dating, but we've started going out for meals together, and I can feel his kindness. For my birthday, he gave me a cat mug that matches his. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe, just maybe, something could happen. Just kidding. You can ski back home by yourself from here. Even with that big belly, 3 hours should be more than enough. Laughing loudly, the man who was once my husband and had vowed to share a future with me, carelessly threw away his ski poles. Shocked by his words, my mother-in-law peered at me from the front passenger seat to the back where I was sitting, and said with an even more sarcastic smile than usual, "As someone who's been through life, let me give you some advice. Even pregnant women need exercise for an easy labor." We were near a ski resort, about a 2-hour drive from the city we lived in. The area was a sparkling silver world. Could it be that these two were planning to abandon me here, 7 months pregnant? Or were they expecting me to cry and beg for help, saying, "Sorry, please help me"? Understood. But I'll walk back, so I don't need the ski poles. Please put them back in the car. With that, I quietly got out of the car. My child and I, these 2 lives, I chose to walk to protect us. Even riding in such a dangerous car, there's no guarantee of safety. Anyone would understand if they heard the reason. Naturally, misfortune befell my husband and mother-in-law. 30 minutes after our separation, incessant calls from my husband. Those were their painful screams as they faced a cruel fate. But one tragedy after another befell them. The truth gradually came to light. Trapped and cornered, the 2 of them fell into the abyss together. My name is Hillary. I work as an operating room nurse at a general hospital on weekdays and enjoy playing tennis on weekends. Being an operating room nurse means handing scalpel to doctors during surgeries, monitoring the progress, and preparing instruments as necessary. Standing continuously for long hours during surgeries is mentally and physically taxing, but saving lives is the most fulfilling job for me. Dealing with such pressures every day, I maintain my mental and physical balance by sweating it out. Playing tennis vigorously under the sun at the club I belong to is the best refreshment for me. That's where I met Joe. I often taught tennis basics to him, a beginner. And naturally, we grew closer because of our similar ages. Joe, a gentle civil servant working in the welfare section of the city hall, always enveloped me with his kind smiles. Surely, his smile must brighten the otherwise sterile atmosphere of his office. Comforted by his calmness, his warmth gradually became a refuge for my heart. Our relationship progressed smoothly, and a year after meeting, we got married and soon conceived a child. I'm currently 7 months pregnant and have temporarily stepped back from work to live a relaxed life. These should have been days full of happiness. However, the reality was, "Mom, what should I do?" I got scolded at work again. How many times have I failed now? That's what Joe would say first to his mother, over the phone as soon as he got home from work. After marriage, I realized Joe had an excessive dependency on his mother, feeling uneasy unless he reported his daily happenings to her. Rather, he couldn't calm down without hearing her voice. He couldn't decide anything on his own, disregarding my opinions and leaving all decisions to his mother. Even our time together was dominated by conversations about his mother. Furthermore, on nights I was on duty, he stayed at his parents' home. Day after day, it was all mom, mom, mom. Listening to that was nearly driving me mad. Yes, he was a hardcore mama's boy. Despite this, Joe cherished people deeply. He never spoke ill to me. And he was especially kind to those older than himself, soft-spoken to everyone, earning him a great reputation among those around us. I deeply respected such a husband. I was attracted to his kindness. And his reverence for his mother was something I couldn't deny. Perhaps even something to emulate. That was his kindness. Convincing myself of this, I turned a blind eye to his relationship with his mother. However, our peaceful life began to crumble due to a trivial incident. Oh. The button on your dress shirt is still off. One day, Joe noticed a button missing from the dress shirt he wore for work. And was about to call his mother in a panic, but I reassured him. It's okay, I'll fix it for you. However, that night, due to my pregnancy, I felt tightness in my abdomen and had to rest, leaving the button unfixed. The next morning, realizing the button was still off, Joe somewhat panicked and reached for his smartphone. See, I should have asked Mom to do it. What should I do? I need to tell her quickly. Watching Joe's frantic behavior, I felt a slight discomfort but tried to soothe him. I'm sorry about yesterday. I was feeling unwell. But you have other dress shirts, right? However, Joe stopped abruptly and glared at me with malice. What are you saying? I decided with Mom to wear this dress shirt yesterday. Now I can't wear it because she picked it out for me. To think. His daily outfits were even decided by his mother. I felt fear and disgust at his behavior. Really? How much of this man's life was controlled by his mother? Mom. What should I do? Mom. Help me. I don't know what to do. Joe hurriedly called his mother, speaking in a low, muffled voice. I couldn't make out what he was saying. But he was certainly complaining about my failure to fix the button. To Joe, who couldn't proceed with peace of mind unless. It was exactly as his mother decided. I was merely a wife in name. Not an important partner in life. His true partner was his mother. How pathetic. How disgusting. Witnessing such a side of Joe, an unprecedented emotion surged within me. Recently, my mood swings had been intense, and I was struggling to control myself. Convincing myself it was probably maternity blues. However, this time, the emotion was uncontrollable. And despite trying to calm myself repeatedly, it felt like something big exploded within me. Stop it already. Mom, it's creepy at your age. Think for yourself. You're about to become a father. Stop relying on your parents for everything. My loud outburst caught Joe off guard, leaving him with a stupefied expression. Hillary, what are you saying? What's wrong with asking Mom when I don't understand something? I've always done it this way. Why are you angry now? With his slow tone and unchanged expression, Joe's creepy approach finally pushed my patience over the edge. Don't ask your parents for advice over a single dress shirt, think for yourself. I've turned a blind eye until now, but I'm at my limit. Be a more responsible father. Stay away. You're disgusting. This was our first real argument as a couple. I knew I shouldn't have said those things. But I couldn't suppress my feelings. Afterward, Joe left the house wearing the shirt with the missing button, without uttering a word in return. Was this really okay? I must have hurt him. Maybe I should have endured it after all. Mixed feelings swirled within me as I spent a gloomy day. From then on, Joe blatantly avoided me, returning home increasingly late. He likely stopped by his parents' house for dinner and spent time with his mother before coming home. But that wasn't enough. He continued talking on the phone with his mother until bedtime. Joe was connected to his mother all the time. I tried apologizing several times for going too far that time. But he neither listened to me nor met my eyes. Even though we lived under the same roof, I felt like I was merely air. Mom, she's glaring at me again today. She seems particularly irritable. Of course, my complaints didn't stop, and it seemed their conversation was lively. Hearing Joe's cheerful voice through the door left me feeling helpless and increasingly alienated. How long would this life continue? I wanted to return to our old days, for the sake of the child about to be born. With that thought, one day I decided to have a proper talk and waited for Joe's return. But that night, the person who opened the front door of our house wasn't Joe, but his mother, wearing a demonic expression. Hey you! Enough is enough. Why do you enjoy tormenting Junpei every day? That kind boy can't even talk back, and he's been coming home crying every night. You devilish wife. Demon. Suddenly, my mother-in-law burst into our home and unleashed a torrent of abuse on me, her eyes filled with madness. The intensity of her fury was so overwhelming that I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move. When did I ever bully my husband? Using your pregnancy as an excuse not to cook dinner. Lazing around all day, what do you think you are? Joe is working his fingers to the bone every day for you. And you're just sitting back and relaxing like a lazy bum. What is going on? Why am I being painted as the villain here? My mind was in a panic, and I couldn't find the words to speak. Unable to say even a simple "you're mistaken." Tears started overflowing as I trembled with fear and frustration. Seeing me cry, my mother-in-law became even more enraged. Why are you crying? Joe is the one who should be crying. Do you think crying will solve everything? You coward. You wicked wife. It was a mistake for him to marry you. She continued to berate me without pause. Powerless, I just looked down and covered my ears, barely managing to muster a barely audible "I'm sorry," as my mother-in-law looked like she might attack me at any moment. I knew everything she was saying was a lie, and I had no reason to apologize. But in that moment, those words were my only escape from this terrifying situation. As expected, my mother-in-law puffed out her chest in triumph and crossed her arms, delivering her final words. Now you understand, you stupid wife. If you bully Joe again, you know it won't end well. And with that, my mother-in-law glared at me until she left the house. After the storm, the silence in the room was broken only by the sound of my own heartbeat. Afterward, Joe's dependence on his mother escalated, and he ended up spending all but weekends at his parents' house. Even when he did come home on weekends, it was only to pick up clothes and personal items, and he spent barely an hour at home. During that time, we didn't speak at all. In such a situation, is there any meaning left in us being a couple? As I began to ponder this one Saturday morning, Joe suddenly opened the front door and called out to me. Hillary, I've come to pick you up. Let's go on a trip right now. What does this mean? Confused, I headed to the entrance. Things haven't been great between us lately. It seems like you've reflected on it. So I'll forgive you. This atmosphere isn't good for the baby either. Let's clear our minds and go skiing. Faced with his absurd suggestion and his old kind smile, my voice cracked in surprise. Skiing? You've never skied before. And with me almost 8 months pregnant, there's no way I can ski. While I appreciated his attempt to break the ice, why skiing? Doubts piled up as I tried to decline, but Joe said, there's a ski resort about 2 hours away by car. A senior at work told me about it. Don't worry. There's even a beginner's course, and pregnant Hillary can ski safely. Everything's ready. You don't have to worry about anything. Come on, let's go. He grabbed my coat and forcibly pulled me toward the car parked outside. With mixed feelings of wanting to trust my husband's intentions for our unborn child and disbelief about skiing, I found myself quickly seated in the back of the car. And we were off. Our next destination was his parents' house. His mother, fully prepared, waved at us smiling from the front porch. Was she joining our couple's trip? Or was there some scheme afoot? Ignoring my confusion, the two of them chatted happily. And the moment his mother climbed into the car and the door shut, she turned to me with a smile and leaned forward from the passenger seat. Hillary, I'm glad you came. Let's enjoy skiing together. This might be a trap. And the car started moving again. Joe driving on snowy roads had to be a first. Not exactly known for his driving skills. Could he really handle snowy roads? And this car, my unease only grew. The pair seemed unusually cheerful throughout the journey, heightening my sense of foreboding. What were they planning? My fists clenched, sweating profusely. We're almost there. Maybe around this area, Joe suddenly said, stopping the car. We were on a mountain road near the ski resort, surrounded by a snowy white world. The weather was clear, and the snow reflected the sunlight like jewels. But its beauty only intensified my anxiety. Get out here. Here, I'll lend you some ski poles, he said, getting out of the driver's seat and carelessly throwing the ski poles from the trunk. What do you mean, here? Isn't the ski resort further ahead? I was stunned, unable to comprehend the situation. Being dropped off like this. No person with a conscience would do such a thing. And in my belly was a precious life. Turning around, my mother-in-law now wore a malicious grin. You know, despite all my anger, you haven't reflected at all. Instead, your attitude has only gotten worse. Despite my warnings, you harass Joe every day. Do you find it amusing to see him suffer? I couldn't understand what she was implying. What had I done to my husband? Given your hot-headed nature, it might be good for you to cool down. Your head in a place like this, she said, laughing loudly. And you know, taking advantage of your pregnancy. You've been lazing around at home lately, haven't you? As someone who's been through life, let me give you some advice. Even pregnant women need exercise for an easy labor. She cackled ominously in the car. In response, Joe also spoke up. You can ski back home from here. Even with that big belly? 3 hours should be more than enough. What exactly were these two expecting from me? Did they think my pleading would satisfy their demands? Or were they seriously intending to abandon me and the baby? No matter their motives, their actions were unforgivable. I would protect my unborn child at all costs. And with this car, it was doubtful we could go any further on the increasingly snowy and icy road. Understood. But it's too dangerous for me to ski in this condition, so I'll walk back. Please put the ski poles back in the car. I said that calmly and got out of the car, turning my back on them. While the sun was still warm, I decided to head toward a populated area. Glancing back, I saw Joe returning the ski poles to the back seat where I had been sitting. This would likely be our last time together. I retraced my path, walking silently along the snowy roadside. Then, as if on cue, the weather turned and snow began to fall. Looking up, the sky quickly darkened with snow clouds, bringing snowfall that soon turned into a fierce blizzard. This is bad. I can't see ahead. The raging snow obscured my vision, and I no longer knew where I was walking. Overcome by fear and cold, my legs stopped moving. I might be done for. Just as I felt my consciousness slipping away, a strong light approached slowly from behind. A car. Amazingly, it stopped beside me. And a man, looking concerned, leaned out from the driver's seat. Fortunately, I was wearing a red dress, making me visible in this gray world. Sensing something was wrong with a pregnant woman walking alone in the snow, the man spoke up. A woman was also seated next to him. The couple, returning from skiing, immediately urged me into the back seat of their car. And the woman offered me a blanket and warm tea. They seemed to understand my situation without needing to ask why. I was walking alone in a blizzard. Without questioning me further, they drove me home. Thus, I was saved by the kind couple. Upon arriving home, I repeatedly offered my thanks. But the couple simply wished for a healthy baby for me, asking for nothing in return as they drove away. The city was as warm and peaceful as if the blizzard in the mountains was unimaginable. I watched their car disappear before entering my house. Meanwhile, Joe and his mother, who had left me behind to climb up the snowy road, seemed to have been in serious trouble. While I was being driven home, Joe had tried to call me several times. However, lulled by the kindness of the couple and the comfort of their warm car, I fell asleep and didn't notice the phone ringing. After arriving home, I was shocked to see a call log that went on for over 30 minutes. What could it be? As I was looking at my phone, Joe called again. Hello. With some hesitation, I answered the phone to hear Joe screaming as if he was panicking. Hillary. Why aren't you answering the phone? What have you been doing? Come back here quickly. It's serious. Mom. Mom has. What selfish things to say. After abandoning me, now he wants me back. I was so appalled by Joe that I was at a loss for words. Joe continued to talk alone on the other side of the receiver. It seems he had a terrible accident. After they left me on the mountain road, they started driving up the ascent on the opposite side. The weather was clear at the time, so they probably thought they could drive to the ski resort. However, the mountain weather is merciless and can change suddenly. They were caught in a fierce blizzard. Joe, not good at driving, couldn't handle the curve because of the strong wind, and the car slipped on the icy road and spun 180 degrees. The car didn't stop and slid down the mountain path, eventually getting stuck in deep snow off the road. When one of the front wheels got buried, his mother got out of the car to check on the front wheel. Despite this, Joe, focused solely on freeing the buried wheel, kept pressing the accelerator hard. Suddenly, the car moved forward. Joe saw his mother in front of him and tried to brake, but it was too late. The icy road only made the car accelerate faster. And in a moment, his mother was trapped under the car. Joe's car slid several feet down before he finally reached his mother, who by then had lost consciousness. Confused, Joe managed to call an ambulance with trembling hands. But it was delayed due to the blizzard. The ambulance still hasn't arrived. Damn it, where are they driving? You're a nurse, aren't you? Come back quickly and treat Mom. If we don't do something, Mom won't make it. Help her. Joe was desperately pleading with me. What? I thought you were worried about me walking alone in the blizzard. But it's about Mom again. Even if you tell me to come back, I'm already home. Handle it yourself. Joe's words were so ridiculous that I couldn't help but snort in disbelief, which only made him even more furious and raised his voice even further. What are you laughing at? We're about to lose a loved one here. Don't you care about human life? You heartless person. I could say the same to you. If human life is so important, don't abandon a pregnant woman in the middle of a snowy mountain and trying to climb a snowy road with no snow tires, with a driver as bad as you? Don't you know that's too reckless? It's no surprise you slipped down. Joe fell silent for a moment at my words. Then he said, "Snow tires? Mom never mentioned anything like that." How could I know? The plan was Mom's idea, I just followed it. The naivety of trying to ascend a snowy road. Probably, his mother was too focused on harassing me to remember to change the tires. Or maybe she genuinely didn't realize the dangers of a snowy mountain. Either way, I'm no longer interested. I don't have time to waste on such a clueless husband. I've been involved in many surgeries as a nurse, but I'm not a doctor. I can't just carelessly examine a seriously injured patient. I can't take responsibility for a life in such a condition. All I can say is, keep her stable and wait for the ambulance. With that, I hung up the phone. I learned of his mother's condition several days later. I had decided to leave Joe and this house, steadily preparing for my new life. I planned to stay with my parents and raise my child there after giving birth. Most of my belongings had been moved by a small truck, and I was at home for a final check when I saw Joe, who had just returned. He was sitting exhaustedly on the sofa. Noticing my presence, he suddenly changed his expression and walked towards me, starting to yell angrily. "Why didn't you help Mom that time? It's your fault Mom can't come home. She's been hospitalized ever since, hasn't fully recovered, and is now paralyzed from the waist down and can hardly speak. She'll have to live in a facility and receive rehabilitation for a long time. It's your fault. You've ruined Mom's life. You traitor. I will never forgive you." No matter how much he yelled, I was no longer the trembling, tearful woman who apologized back then. I have a life to protect. I glared back at him without flinching. What about Mom, Mom, you Mama's boy? If Mom's life is so important, don't just blindly follow her commands, think and act for yourself. Changing to snow tires is basic knowledge for snowy mountains. Who else would hit the accelerator hard when someone is in front of them? Don't underestimate the dangers of a snowy mountain. Joe's face turned even redder at my words. Shut up. Don't blame me. I got hurt too. Look at this back. Your ski pole stabbed right below my neck. I nearly died. Saying this, Joe lifted his sweater to show me his back, where indeed a painful scar remained. It happened because you just put the ski poles back in the back seat instead of properly securing them in the trunk. We could have prevented the accident if you had done that properly. That's what I'm saying. You underestimated the snowy mountain, and it's your fault. Plus, I have a life to protect. You left that irreplaceable life in the freezing cold. Someone who disregards such a life is not a father or anything else. Saying this, I presented Joe with the divorce papers I had prepared. From now on, you can take care of your mom and enjoy living with her. I will live with our unborn child. Let's end this. Then, Joe snatched the divorce papers from me and threw them away. The paralysis of his mother, our divorce, his own injuries, Too many things had happened at once, probably overwhelming him. Joe continued to rant incoherently, unable or unwilling to face reality, repeating nonsensical things. We can't settle this just by talking. Let's involve lawyers from now on. Saying this, I headed for the entrance. There was no reason for me to stay in this house anymore. Suddenly, the front door opened, and two unfamiliar men entered the house. Dressed in suits, but with sharp eyes and hands shoved in their pockets. They walked in without any hesitation and confronted Joe, demanding that he pay back the interest and everything today. Joe trembled with fear, unable to move. What on earth was happening? It turned out his mother had become involved in a dubious religion and had been making high donations. The story goes back to the time Joe and I got married. Jealous of me marrying her beloved son, his mother searched for ways to drive me away and stumbled upon this religion. She was easily brainwashed at a meeting she attended just to try it out, and quickly became a devout follower. She bought expensive charms, pots, and even ineffective water, claiming they would ward off evil spirits. She chanted sutras daily, frequently visited the facility, and devotedly prayed for her faith. Moreover, impressed by the sage words of the religious leader, she made lavish donations. The trip to the snowy mountain was not her meticulous plot, but the teachings of the religious leader. I was horrified to realize she harbored such animosity towards me. Unable to get by on her pension alone, his mother had borrowed money to fund her substantial contributions to the religion. Joe was unaware of this. The debt collectors, who had learned of the mother's paralysis and her stay in a facility from the neighborhood, decided they couldn't approach the facility and switched their target to Joe, her son. I don't have money right now. Sweat streamed down Joe's forehead, and he was too shocked to even wipe it away. The two men noticed me and asked if I was his wife. By then, I was no longer his wife nor had any relation to his mother. No, I'm just a stranger, I replied, and after gathering my remaining belongings, I confidently left the house without looking back. Behind me, I could hear Joe's cries, but it had nothing to do with me anymore. Thus, I headed to my parents' house. Months passed, and spring had fully arrived. Through lawyers, our divorce was finalized, and Joe was ordered to pay me compensation. Unable to see an end to the hellish days of working off his former mother-in-law's ballooning debts, the additional burden of high compensation probably left him physically and mentally drained. However, his actions towards me were unforgivable, and no matter how much he suffered, I had every right to receive the compensation. And another source of his suffering was his paralyzed former mother-in-law. Unable to walk or even eat by herself, she could manage daily life only thanks to Joe's dedicated care. Yet she felt no gratitude, instead screaming daily that her condition was his fault. Moreover, despite suffering under heavy debts, his mother continued her zealous religious activities, causing trouble in the facility and being expelled repeatedly. Joe desperately pleaded with her to stop her missionary work, but each request led to arguments, with no end in sight. Meanwhile, I had safely given birth to a girl. With my parents' help, I was navigating the unfamiliar challenges of parenting but enjoying peaceful days. Holding my precious and warm little life, I remembered the couple who had saved me on the snowy mountain. They had not even told me their names, but if I ever meet them again, I want to tell them, thanks to you, a healthy child was born. My savings, which I have accumulated through hard work since my single days, were meant to be untouched for our children's future. I never expected those savings to be used for such a thing. Just because we're married doesn't mean anything goes. My name is Alyssa, and I'm 32 years old. I married Greg when I was 24. And I got pregnant soon after. We now have 2 children. My son is 7 and my daughter is 5. Both are growing up healthy without any major illnesses. When my daughter turned 3, I returned to my previous job. 2 years have passed since I resumed work, and now I earn about the same salary as Greg. Since he only contributes the bare minimum to our living expenses, I have to save for myself and our children from my own salary. I really wish Greg would cooperate more. However, whenever I bring up money, he always looks annoyed and even gets grumpy with the children. So, I've stopped talking about money in front of him. Then one day, my sister-in-law Megan came to our house. I happened to be working from home that day. "Alyssa, please. Let me stay with you for a while." As soon as I opened the door, Megan burst into tears and clung to me. Confused by the suddenness, I was perplexed. "Wait, what's going on? My husband wants a divorce." "What?" "A divorce." Megan was still single when Greg and I got married. And she only got married a year ago to a man who seemed very kind and worked for a corporation. They looked so happy at their wedding. But now, just a year later, they are talking about divorce. I couldn't just leave her crying, so I let her into the house. I decided to hear her out first. "Well, Megan, I know it's tough, but why suddenly a divorce?" Sniffling, Megan opened up. "I haven't done anything wrong. But he suddenly says he can't stand living with me anymore." "Isn't that terrible?" "What? Your husband said that? Don't you think it's awful?" "You must think I'm pitiable, right, Alyssa?" She pressed me intensely, making me feel undue pressure. However, it's hard to believe that her kind husband would propose divorce without any reason. I managed to calm her down and decided to wait for Greg to come home from work. When Greg returned, we put the kids to bed and started discussing with Megan. "So, Megan, why has it come to divorce?" As Greg asked, Megan began crying again. "I want to know that too. I've been working hard for him all this time. And yet, he says, it's impossible to live with you. Isn't that cruel?" Despite her saying that, there's no way her husband would come up with such an idea without a reason. Listening to her alone won't solve anything. Megan has always had a selfish and willful side. That might be why this divorce is happening. "Well, Megan, are you sure there's really no reason at all? Your husband isn't the type to be unreasonable." As I gently defended her husband, Megan glared at me sharply. "What, Alyssa? Are you taking his side over mine? I've been working hard as a wife. And yet he's pushing me towards divorce." "No. It's not about taking sides. But I doubt he would bring up divorce without any reason. What do you know about him, Alyssa? You're defending him too much." After a pause, Megan looked at me suspiciously. "Oh, don't tell me, Alyssa, you're not having an affair with him, are you?" "What? No way." Oh my, the conversation has taken a strange turn. Of course, there's nothing untoward between Megan's husband and me. I don't even have his contact information. Thankfully, Greg also chimed in. "Megan, that's not possible." "Don't worry." And I felt a bit relieved. Still, it's curious. Despite Megan claiming she worked hard as a wife, she is vague about why she is facing divorce. I asked Greg to urgently invite his brother over. Megan had already left, saying she didn't want to meet him. Upon arrival, Megan's husband apologized right away, saying, "Sorry for causing trouble for you too." I decided to delve into the details because it seemed unlikely such a reasonable person would ask for a divorce without cause. "Well, I'm sorry to ask so suddenly, but why did you bring up divorce with Megan?" Megan's husband looked troubled and looked down. "Did you perhaps cheat on her?" "Hey, Greg. How can you say such a thing?" I scolded Greg for his inappropriate comment. After a moment, Megan's husband finally spoke up. "Actually, Megan has spent all of my savings, about $50,000. $50,000. I exclaimed, shocked by the amount. He hadn't been upfront because it involved money, which isn't a pretty topic. $50,000. What did she spend it on? I asked cautiously, and he sighed deeply. I asked her, but she only said it was for living expenses. I've been giving her a fixed amount every month for living expenses. But she said it wasn't enough. Feeling apologetic, I thought to myself, it's believable Megan would do this. Because she had also nonchalantly asked us for money during her single days. She'd say, "We're family, right?" and even went through my wallet without asking. Knowing this side of Megan, I found her husband's story all too plausible. He slumped in disappointment. If she can explain what she spent my savings on and agrees to repay it, I'd consider pausing the divorce. But she keeps insisting it was for living expenses. I felt terribly sorry for Megan's husband. They don't even have children. And he was giving Megan an allowance. It's suspicious that she spent $50,000 in just a year. Eventually, Greg spoke up. "So, if she returns the money, the divorce could be avoided?" "Yeah. Got it, I'll talk to her about it." Greg took on the responsibility, but I wondered how Megan, a homemaker, planned to repay the money. I wondered if he was going to repay in place of her. After sending Megan's husband off, Megan returned home. What happened? What did he say? As Megan bombarded him with questions, Greg confidently replied, "If you return the $50,000 you spent, he won't ask for a divorce." To which Megan firmly responded, "How could I possibly have that kind of money? I only used it for living expenses and did nothing wrong." It's unclear if Megan really spent it all on living expenses. But her insistence that she's completely blameless is troubling. Megan's husband's decision to propose divorce seems reasonable. Just then, Greg said something outrageous. "Don't worry, Megan, Alyssa has lots of savings." What? I exclaimed involuntarily as my money was taken for granted. Megan's eyes lit up as she turned to me. "Really? Alyssa, you should have said something sooner." "No way, this is wrong." What are they even saying? Especially Greg, damn husband. He can't just decide to use someone else's savings. After cursively reprimanding them in my mind, I calmed down and firmly declined. "Well, I can't lend you my savings." "If you really need money, ask Greg." Upon hearing this, Greg inexplicably lashed out. "Hey Alyssa. Megan is really struggling. Don't you want to help her?" "Exactly, Alyssa. With your savings, I could avoid divorcing my husband." Both Greg and Megan were now spouting nonsense, proving they were indeed siblings. I genuinely sympathized with Megan's husband. and thought it might be better for him to get a divorce sooner rather than later. Greg, not liking my stance, exploded again. Are you serious, Alyssa? When my sister, our family, is struggling, you can't even lend just $50,000. Just $50,000. When he said that, something inside me snapped. I felt my body heat up as anger surged through me. Just $50,000. Don't be ridiculous. This money, I saved up from my single days. Why should I use it for your sister who squandered her husband's money? I've always said it's for our children's future. I managed to hold back my trembling body. Megan stood there with her mouth agape, overwhelmed. Greg looked shocked but quickly retorted. Well, you can just save up again. Megan needs that money now. Are you kidding me? I don't care. I spat back fiercely. Then you lend her the money if it's so important. You're her real sibling. And isn't it embarrassing to ask your wife to solve your sister's problems? What? Greg turned red with anger, biting his lip, unable to respond. Fine. I want a divorce from such a heartless woman. Divorce? You mean you and me? That's right. I don't need a heartless woman who won't help family. Suddenly, he rummaged through a drawer and pulled out divorce papers. He signed them and stamped them right in front of me. Here, sign this quickly. So he kept such documents just in case. I was worried about our children. Taking them away from their father was concerning. He smirked at me, perhaps thinking I wouldn't go through with it. You can't do it, can you? You wouldn't dare become a single mother suddenly. Would you? Better to lend my sister the $50,000, right? At that moment, everything became irrelevant. I was done. Better to be a single mother than to deal with such ridiculous siblings. I signed the divorce papers and stamped them. What? Alyssa. He seemed truly shocked that I had signed. Tomorrow, I'll file these. I started packing my things and the kids silently. Craig, panicking, asked, Alyssa, you're really going to file that? Of course. Why wouldn't I? Why so casually? Didn't you give it to me to sign first? Well, yes, but... The next morning, I submitted the divorce papers to the court first thing. Greg and Megan probably hadn't slept much, as they looked completely worn out. I told the children, let's go to Grandpa and Grandma's house. And prepared them for the move. It seemed cruel to suddenly tell them about the divorce. Especially since they are still so young. I planned to explain things to them calmly and simply once we had settled down a bit. When I was leaving with the children, Greg had tears in his eyes. Alyssa. You're coming back, right? This isn't really going to end in divorce, is it? But it is. It's too late to cancel it now. From now on, please indulge your beloved sister to your heart's content and support each other. I said this with heavy sarcasm, throwing the words back at him. However, I truly felt sorry for the children. Due to our selfish reasons, they were losing their father and the home they had lived in. Nevertheless, if I had continued to let those two dictate my life, my savings would have been devoured. And even the future of these children would have been at risk. I refused to have my life thrown into disarray by such unreasonable siblings. I moved back to my parents' house, where I explained the situation and asked to stay for a while. After explaining things in simple terms, the children accepted the situation, saying, as long as Mom is with us, that's fine. And Mom has always been there for us. Greg kept contacting me persistently after that, but now I block all his calls. The divorce has already been finalized. And I plan to hire a lawyer to ensure child support payments. Meanwhile, Megan and her husband also divorced soon after. She claimed to have used the savings for living expenses, but it turned out she had been splurging on luxury brands. When Megan's husband secretly searched her room, he was shocked to find a large stash of luxury goods. As a result, she was forced into divorce and had to reimburse the $50,000 she had spent, without mercy. She managed to return about $20,000 with what was left of Greg's modest savings. But she will have to work to pay back the remaining $30,000. Now that the divorce is settled, I have to pay the property division. Please help me. She tried to appeal to her parents with her usual crying antics. But since I had already explained everything to them, they quickly refused her. Not only Megan, but Greg too was severely reprimanded. And they both ended up being disowned. Really, those siblings are beyond saving. At least I hope they manage without causing trouble for others. I'm truly glad that Greg and Megan didn't end up taking it from me. I will continue to use this money carefully to ensure my children grow up well.